Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Smart City Technology Management, How SolarWinds Can Help. I'm Mark Smith on the Government Marketing team and I'm kicking off today's event. We'll get started in a moment, but first let's cover a few housekeeping items. The webcast is being recorded and will be sent out in a few days along with the slides. Phones are muted and participants are encouraged to type questions into the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. Our speaker today is Sean Martinez, a technical account manager on our government team. Sean, please take it from here.
Thank you, Mark. As mentioned, my name is Sean Martinez, and I am the technical account manager here at SolarWinds. Just go ahead and show my information here real quick. And we'll also have the contact information at the end of today's webinar. Today's agenda, we have, it will go into the introduction about SolarWinds, SolarWinds, what we can do. So a little bit about the technology overview, how we can apply to smart cities, how SolarWinds can monitor, troubleshoot network systems, apps, tighten security, improve services and the systems management, different aspects, give a little bit of demonstration in those different areas, make sure we give a little bit of resources, and then open it up to a little bit of a question and answer at the end. And as mentioned, we will have a recording of this. There, you will have a copy of these slides since you did sign up, you will get that information. And like I mentioned, there will also be contact information at the end if you do have any additional questions or any one-offs that we need to go into. So go on into who we are. SolarWinds was founded in 1999. We were focused on two key aspects. One was on the key issue at the time, which was Y2K tools, and the other was for monitoring availability and performance. Growing on to our success, we definitely went into the network side, going into network availability, performance, slowly growing into systems, servers, applications, databases, virtualization, storage. We've grown also into ticketing, service desk side, cloud side as well. And with that, we've definitely grown to be a very large portfolio for a lot of customers. We have large deployments across a lot of public sector, enterprise, Department of Defense branches, U.S. civilian, national government, as well as NATO branches, state governments. So we have quite a number of deployments quite around the world, utilized for quite a little different functions. And so really the idea here is to kind of go over what is the SolarWinds ITOM, or the SolarWinds IT operations management. The different services or different aspects. IT as a whole are sometimes seeing in a whole part or in different facets. Sometimes we do cross these different realms. We have to work all together, especially at the higher level, to not only just provide a overall service tier, service availability, but ensure that we have good accessibility, performance, ensure that what we're doing is working well not only for us but for our end users, and then ensuring that all end users and technicians alike really understand what's going on when there is an outage, because no matter where it sits, on premise, maybe we're supporting a lot of remote locations, maybe we're having to support a lot of field deployments, maybe we have a private cloud or some sort of public cloud, so maybe we have some sort of we are maybe going into application or server deployment with some sort of professional service, or utilizing one of the more traditional public cloud like AWS or Azure cloud. How can you get the visualization or understanding about is it us, maybe the cloud provider, how are we properly utilizing the cloud provider or that MSP or that service properly, or how can we make sure that we are we running into any capacity problems. You can also set and define SLAs. So with your service line agreements, as it relates to network or infrastructure, maybe server application, database, And even with cybersecurity, being able to kind of mesh or bring all these different areas together, and that's really what the idea with our IT operations management is that we have a lot of customers that'll sometimes focus on some, or mishmash, or every different area, and so we do have a lot of the tools to handle that if needed. So we do have quite a number of our customers that do deploy as standalone tools, or they will combine and solve them to solve interconnected problems. So it's very common for us to see, or a customer, especially a first-time customer, to come to our site because you are looking at an infrastructure, a device, a system, an application problem. We need to understand what's going on with their databases. We have a lack of budget for additional headcount, or just a lack of headcount because of not able to find a talent pool. So how do we get some sort of aggregation, visualization, understanding, so that no matter who's looking at the infrastructure, we can at least understand, visualize, and start triaging small ticket items, and then start looking at some of the more larger existing issues that might have been creeping along in the infrastructure as a whole, maybe possibly through decades of deployment, scope, even very common because of compliance reasons. But understanding and documenting those are also very important, because when we are looking at areas of combining applications and database, is that because of some sort of a storage performance issue, or is it more of a frontline server problem? When we talk about network and IT security, is it more of our applications having accessibility leaving the network, or is it because cybersecurity set such specific access control list rules where if there's some sort of movement, we are having problems? So being able to understand that information, in being able to definitely visualize and centralize to simplify what's going on is really where we really start to excel for a lot of customers. Because I always say when I talk with a lot of customers, especially, I used to always kind of talk with the more traditional, is it a router, switch, firewall? Is it a server? Is it a workstation? But because any device, even in the last few years, really does have capabilities almost turning into almost a server in a sense. So you do have a lot of Internet of Things devices where you can be able to deploy embedded devices or project-specific devices to be able to be deployed out to those sites or systems. I have a lot of customers that are having to source data sources, leverage that information, keep that historically. I always say, especially as data becomes older, that also becomes its own security threat over time, because who has access to that data? How accessible is that? Has anyone touched it? So being able to sense and source, and being able to see who is accessing those logs also becomes paramount. When you're having to deal with multiple servers, being able to aggregate, group, being able to visualize, is this a clustered system? Should we be aware if one or multiple servers are having failures or having potential issues? Or as long as one server's up, maybe this whole group should be fine. And then we have, kind of going over a little slide on here on the outstanding ring is, I always say your more traditional, whether we talk about cloud or security or applications. So when we talk about cloud, it always comes to big data, or making data available to not only just ourselves, but sometimes to other entities and other realms. So how can we make that information accessible, but at the same time secure the information and log that data, so if someone, a foreign actor, bad actor, does take advantage of that data, we can see who did what when, and being able to at least source and forensically report who did what when. And then when we talk about applications, I always say it comes really with apps, is the apps and the endpoints like mobile phones. So understanding, is it a performance-related issue? Is there some sort of inter-server, interconnected latency problem, or is it something with that endpoint device like a mobile phone, wireless network? Maybe we're having to go across a web platform, so across Chrome or Firefox or some sort of browser system. Maybe we're utilizing an application like we are here today to be able to cross this this webinar. So is that some sort of end user related visible reportable system that we need to be able to report? And then I always say at the end of the day, you really need to be able to have, be able to monitor not only the network infrastructure, or just the infrastructure of the servers and the networks, but also understand what's going on with the remote IT support, because, or just your support tier, because they're your front end, right? So they're the ones that are getting the front calls, or the ones triaging the first tickets. So they're the ones that are ears to the door, listening to hear what are the current or upcoming problems that maybe some of the tools are missing because of accessibility issues, not being able to put in tickets, or things just going down. And so that's really where a lot of customers start looking into, from a management's perspective, how to better understand, because especially when there is those type of problems, how we understand what type of issue is it. Are we looking at it from the infrastructure management aspect? Are we focusing more on the application performance? Maybe we do have a focus on some of the digital platforms like ServiceNow or Salesforce, some sort of services tier, or tier where we have some sort of project management like Jira or other applications like GitLab, being able to log and centralize and aggregate all that information, so especially the security and the vulnerability teams can be able to do their jobs effectively, efficiently, and be able to triage, segregate from the network, be able to understand what's going on, and then be able to recover just as quickly without taking out the entire application. Because with that, you really do have to have some sort of full-on IT service management tier to really just be able to have a good project management, to really just leverage all these different tiers as a whole. So like I mentioned, when we talk about infrastructure, I always say it really is not just network, but also servers and applications. So there's really a full stack or multi-facet stack visibility of understanding what's going on with that infrastructure, understanding what's going on with the application. Maybe that application has common back end or front end, right? So like I mentioned, when we work with cloud services, it usually happens to be an endpoint issue with the region or the site. Or if there's an issue with the infrastructure, is it a building, a location? Did we have a power failure? So being able to group and being able to visually, dynamically map that information, so that way in case there is an outage or an issue, we can not only just not help just to monitor and identify the issue, but just as easily troubleshoot, identify, and resurrect that application or really infrastructure issues quickly. Also, you can do the same thing for really, I always say, any infrastructure, so whether it's wired or wireless, and be able to provide some sort of quality of experience. Because especially that's where a lot of customers want to be able to really show two things: is not only how well are we working, but how well are our other users able to work. Being able to identify and define service line agreements, so that way in case, if I can't go click on this website, if I can't go to these certain details or views, I need to know when that page is taking 2 minutes or 3 minutes, because I know I suddenly get at least 5 or 10 tickets whenever that starts to occur. So by defining that service line agreements, we can go ahead and set that quality of experience on the monitoring side and the availability side, so that way when those slowness issues, not just an outage issue, starts to creep up, we can also start to at least bring notice or notification about potential issues that are starting to occur in or outside the infrastructure. And then the other areas, obviously, like I said, just not user experience, but really just visualization of the different sites. Like I said, we do have different visualization. I'll make sure to go into is our mapping and our application stack. We've reworked a lot of different ways so that we can dynamically map and once you group systems, how all of them kind of interconnect, because really when we do talk about servers or network devices, we do want to see how what ports are they connected on, what's the latency, packet loss, are there routing changes, latency incursions that are occurring, when are those occurring, and maybe there's a coup or continuity of operations over that's occurring, and because of that, we suddenly saw some additional latency, and that was because of that drop off because of power. So being able to understand, visualize, or report on that does help you understand the true cause of that possible problem. And then I always say at the end of the day is being able to not only just monitor and manage, but leverage all the information for API, just for visibility. So not just visibility within the tools, but externally out with the tools. So taking taking some custom information from applications and having SolarWinds tools monitor that application information, or even looking into SolarWinds data and leveraging our API to be able to leverage that for visibility externally. I always say data platform management really comes down to the reference of what you're looking at, because a lot of customers sometimes are looking to customize for additional visibility and monitoring, or additional integration and visibility with other tools with our system, because you've already had success with our tools. So how can we take it to the next step of, whenever that alert triggers, I want you to send a message into my chat window letting me know what was the last email message and some of the last information of that outage, or that device whenever there was an issue. Having IT security, or the ability of really just having vulnerability management, is a huge area. Going into the response to help save time and improve the IT security, to go ahead and report back what's going on with the system as it reports to possible vulnerability outages or vulnerability issues as it relates to the system. In case there is any, there's been a lot of vulnerability issues recently. There was a processor manufacturer recently came out with about 50 different outages. And one of the things that they did release was a couple of zero-day releases. So there has been a couple of vulnerability issues in the last 30 days with Windows systems patching. There's also been some other ones as it relates to monitoring your more standard network device. So in case that there is a router switch firewall, it will go ahead, maybe we need to go ahead and understand, is there some sort of vulnerability we need to take a look at? Do we have that implemented, that feature or function? And then is there some sort of configuration or firmware upgrade or change that we can do to improve or resolve or remediate that problem? And then at the end of the day, I always say, last thing, like I said, is a support desk solution. So how can we understand to route, track, triage, and improve response times, response time frames, but also understand what's going on with your outages, because maybe we need to figure out just understanding or triaging based upon or figure out step categorization based upon the ticket types. First responses is a huge area customers like to look into. Has someone touched this case in the first 1 to 12 hours, especially based upon the status type, and then the reporting of how well and how accurate we are for not only just the support tickets, but also for outages and issues. And especially with the performance monitoring, like I mentioned, there's a lot of different areas of monitoring the system. Not only just monitoring the application performance, but system performance of CPU memory is the more traditional. You have CPU memory interface, routing changes, route flaps. There is also your power supply failures, fan failures. We happen to have a lot of customers, or a few customers, where we've had a power supply fail, and then they'd actually report the log, and the system would go ahead and have the problem. I had a server a couple months ago go ahead and report that one of the 5 volts rails was abnormally reporting low, and so because of that, in the hardware monitor, I could then see that, hey, there was an issue with that power supply that will need potential replacements, because especially with any of your 3, 5, 12 volt rails in those systems, once we start having power fluctuations, we start then having application problems, because maybe that was a virtual server that was supporting 15 systems. So then you could start seeing and understanding, not only when the power supply is having problems or having just a straight up failure, is there something specific with that system or application. Going into web performance, so being able to troubleshoot the web application, not only just the front end, but also, not just the back end, but also the front end, monitoring the end user experience, making sure that we can set up good monitoring for the system applications, especially if it's working inside or outside of the firewall. We do have a lot of customers that like to understand, especially when we do have a firewall or some sort of DMZ environments or a load balancer, what is the additional latency with those systems between the systems. So we do have a lot of customers that will sometimes monitor the individual servers and then monitor the load balancers, so that way they can kind of understand what's the two variance differences between the two load times. And then, like I mentioned with security, there's different areas of security, so being able to not just log, but aggregate the logs, being able to correlate, take a look to see what's going on with the logs, and then we actually have the ability of having auto responses. So not just the ability of sending an email message, but also being able to send out a, let's say we need to stop a process, stop a service, log off a user. We have different accessible options to then take, not only just manage the vulnerabilities, but take actions when a possible vulnerability has arose. Because when we do listen for other logs from, say, antiviruses or your Microsoft Defender application, so whenever those are saying that, hey, there's a lot of file changes or there's a lot of utilization, maybe then having a security event management tool then go ahead and say, we see that this is occurring on this system. We need you to go ahead and segment this from the network or from the infrastructure, so that way we can go ahead and triage it and go ahead and log it into the system, and then go ahead and maybe report that over to the different systems. Oh yeah, and then the last one in here is for the vulnerabilities. Managing your network, you're managing your vulnerabilities, especially in the configuration realm. Looking at the known vulnerabilities, making sure that we can use, if there's vulnerability baselines. We have a lot of customers that look at the area as it relates to, is there a specific, some sort of a baseline or some sort of, can change in the configuration that is currently occurring over time in the system. If there's a problem of the system, being able to go ahead and report back that system as having a configuration change. When there's a failure of the configuration, go ahead and report back the actual problem of the system, and then have some sort of real-time change detection, and then maybe we do need to have some automated response. If the system saw a configuration change and suddenly reported it's down, let's then go ahead and respond back with the report of or attempt to log in and roll back the last configuration change. Great. So let's go into the improving security real quick. So especially with improving security, improving cybersecurity with the configuration and the log management, we actually have two specific modules, two specific tools. When we look at the system in here, we actually have the network configuration manager as well as the security event manager to be able to monitor and be able to log all the different changes within the system. Especially when we look at the network configuration manager, be able to report, like I said, real-time change detection, have compliance. Also, if there was a configuration change or some sort of rule or STIG requirement we have, or some sort of just basic rule, being able to go ahead and play with the set the rules, and if there is something in or outside of the configuration, go ahead and alert and report on the system. Similar with the security event manager, so in case that there is some sort of events, some sort of event log, some sort of problem or some sort of issue, go ahead and report that back as a potential problem, or just flag that as an alert and start some sort of workflow process. We have quite a number of customers that utilize this, especially today with a ransomware process system. So especially in the smart city technology, we can create a wide range of supported requirements. It really just comes down to what issues need to be reported, tracked, especially resolved in a timely time frame. Really depends upon what the support is. We do have a lot of customers or users our support sometimes for teachers and students. They're having to support a lot recently, especially when we have to support areas as around like network, VPN, connectivity issues. Line of sight is very common. Having to report through, very, very disparate and very disconnected networks. I have some customers supported, especially in national parks, so they're doing line of sight. Very, very problems where you just can't run a line, right? So you can definitely understand where they're just trying to get some sort of accessibility and visibility of what's going on with the infrastructure. And then being able to, just definitely track the service desk demands or systems for, managing your delivery. So that way, you're not, overwhelmed with all the ticketings overall. Because really when we're doing like remote accessing, especially systems, having to resolve technical issues as it relates to, I always say your most common problems usually relate to the applications that your users were looking or utilizing all the time. I always have to support things like, are the printers up or down, or there's Outlook issues, more basic supportability of the system, but being able to understand a little bit more about the user, and then being able to understand a little bit more about their ticket history and report it back into the system. Okay, so here we can definitely improve here a little bit with the IT or the service management system. With here we can go ahead and support the users with different technical difficulties and help them to hopefully remotely resolve a lot of your technical issues. So whether it is some more basic ticketing system, especially when we talk about like ITIL processes, we will have a lot of customers that will look at, especially at like Web Help Desk or anything, especially if it's something as small as a lab, or going up to some of the more larger deployments for ticketing systems. There's also a larger ITSM, the SolarWinds Service Desk, that's also available, as well as Dameware Remote Everywhere, support for cloud-based ticketing, as well as remote supportability supports. And then there's also the more traditional Dameware remote supports, as the MiniRow Control that can be utilized, so that way in case you do need to have more of an on-premise servicing solution, you can go ahead and report back the see what the user sees and be able to handle that all offline, especially if we have limited connectivity to the internet. Great. So I just brought up first off, I just brought up our SolarWinds Orion Console. So this is more of our what we consider our availability, performance, configuration, capacity planning, a little bit of a single pane of glass for all of the little bit of IT infrastructure. We do have a lot of customers that do have to support, like I mentioned, your more traditional networks, so your router, switch, firewall, servers, IT systems. We do have a lot of customers that are also having to support IoT-based systems, so sometimes things like Raspberry Pis, embedded systems, having to work with UPS, print servers. So especially when we have to work with those different tools, it just depends upon the ports and protocols, and what type of modules or what products could we possibly utilize to support or give additional information and visibility on those systems. And if you have any questions on those, you can always just ask us later on, afterwards, at any time really. We will always be more than happy. We always want to make sure that we can give you a good understanding about how you can understand or visualize the infrastructure. Because the idea here is that when we're looking at the infrastructure, it's very common for us to have customers to go into your top 10 page and then go look into maybe, we always call this your first cup of coffee view. So what's looking at the whole infrastructure as a whole, what's having outage issues, what's having utilization issues, and then like I mentioned earlier, by having those service line agreements of warning and critical thresholds, we can go ahead and take a look and see, is this a warning issue? Is this a critical problem? Is this fine, or is this something we need to look into with more, as a possible, more critical type problem? One of the other things too is once you start monitoring and tracking all this performance utilization, being able to then go ahead and project. So giving some sort of historical, not only just utilizing the historical record, but leveraging it to let us know when are we expected to go into those warning or critical thresholds? When are we expecting to go into full capacity? How many hours, days, weeks, months, is it trending up or is it trending down on that storage system? And, what type of system? Because especially when we look at your more physical disks, this disk here is 1 terabyte versus this one here, which is 80 gigs. So by leveraging, both those numbers, if I had just a straight 80 or 90%, those could be very large differences in how much space is capable. So by leveraging our capacity percentages and this projection here, we can actually give you better data so that you can see what's a possible issue, when do we see problems now or possibly in the future here. So here I can see this one server is in warning or critical. I mouse over it real quick, it's showing it as a problem. Same thing with this system here. And we always try to give you some sort of sub view. So here we can see that this was memory, and I can go ahead and take it over to the system and it's showing me the memory utilization. So now I'm over into that memory detail view and I can go into more details, or I can go back on the breadcrumbs to go take a look at the more of the higher the device level. When we are looking at the device level, we are, like I said, we have this dynamic map so that we can leverage this so that we can, when we're triaging, understanding what's going on with the system, we can see what applications is it responsible for, but also what data stores does it report to. So if there is an application issue, we can see this one's doing like work files. So this one's more related to just the server configuration. So a quick configuration here, on this could possibly resolve this issue, so that way I don't have to do a whole bunch of changes like moving to a different data store or everything in here. But if we needed to, we could take a look at this data store to see if there was a storage issue. Are we over our subscription rates? Are we looking at, is there a chatty VM that's causing most of this utilization? Where is it coming from? So this one VM is causing a lot of the spikes in here. So we could jump and go in between the different systems as a whole, but also look at the whole storage footprint. We can also map out this infrastructure. So if you do go under the map and map view, in fact, every details view now includes this new mapping view. So that way, in case you do want to see that, the storage goes to, this one host, or I have a cluster of servers, this one direct attached or network attached storage or SAN goes to a cluster of ESXi or VMware servers or other systems. So what are those reported systems, and then being able to then connect back to those. There's always going to be, like I mentioned, there is a map view, so that way we can show you kind of how everything kind of interconnects. And we've done a lot of work with this map too, so that way you could definitely leverage different ways of visualizing your overall footprint in the network or in the infrastructure. So when in here, I brought the more traditional network topology. So this is a more traditional what you'd see with a layer 2 or layer 3 connection of the system. If there's an issue, we can go ahead and take a look at the links, the interlinks in the system, being able to visualize it. Same thing with applications, being able to show links and interlinks. One of the newer features of the product is being able to not only just incorporate your data, but being able to leverage the data in the map view. So whenever we want to take a look at, maybe there was an outage, between Saturday and Monday morning or Monday. So we need to go ahead and redraw that for a custom time period, and then we can go ahead to play this historical loop. So what it'll do is it'll go ahead and show each time period, and then show the performance data of the system at that time. If I click on that server or I click on that connector, it'll actually take us to another reportable tool, so that way we can then start taking a look at the performance data as it relates to that time period that we were just looking at in the map. Now, this is great because then we can definitely look and source the data, because we've done a really good job of giving you a lot of data accessible to our product, but we try to give it in different ways because maybe we are trying to look at a common time format. And so the next question is, well, what alerts were triggered at that time period? Was there anyone that maybe looked at that alert? Who's what was going on in that system? So we can go ahead and in the view, with our performance analysis, you can actually drag and drop alerts for any device, and then there's this inspect selection in the Data Explorer, and it'll actually give you all that data in the same contextual view. So this is a great tool because now I'm not only just seeing only the performance data or only the alerts data in separate. A lot of customers used to see this in separate pages or separate widgets, but now having it in the same view and integrated together, because now I can see just the events on just this time frame, and now I can see a little bit more in detail about what, when, and why did it happen. And then if I need to, I can go into the system, add other devices, add other systems. If this is a great report, I could save this. I can even have this on a dashboard page. So this could be accessible to myself, my team. It can also be leveraged as an alert. So whenever the device has an issue or an application has a problem, it could then go ahead and flag it and then send it over send your users over to the system, letting you know that that system is having an outage or having a problem. Now, especially when we look at the different views here, when we're talking about quality experience, I always say there's multiple different ways of doing and utilizing quality experience in the system. One way is by leveraging what we have in the systems natively by monitoring or interrogating your network device, your router switch firewall, or your servers. With our server and application or network performance monitor, we also have a quality experience tool, so that way you can leverage to understand a little bit more about what's going on with the system performance, or network versus server latency. This is a big question a lot of customers ask is, we're having an application problem, we're having a systems problem, maybe internally in the network or somewhere, and we need to understand, really one of the first questions is it the server or infrastructure or server side, or is it possibly the network side that's having the problem? And so by being able to visualize, we could see very quickly in here, what data traffic, what ports and protocols were being utilized, and then being able to source those back to those servers, showing, is there an application latency, is there a network latency, how much data is being transacted across the infrastructure, so in case we are having to support a lot of remote locations, especially as it relates to, I'm having support right now for a lot of systems, usually streaming devices where it's streaming data back to a different source. So being able to see, how's the responsible time as it relates to the system. If I'm having a network response issue, what servers are responding back to primarily, and what is that average and that peak value? So here we can see, worst value 9 seconds. And so we are having a little bit of more of a network issue than I am having an application problem. And if I actually dig into this a little bit, the reason is actually because of my line of sight that I'm actually using for this infrastructure. And so that's really the nice thing, is being able to look into this and being able to see that, hey, there is an issue with this application or this server, and then being able to then go into the system a little bit more in detail to understand a little bit more about why we're having these system problems. I'm going to jump over real quick here. Since I talked on performance, I want to make sure to touch on configuration, because configuration has been a large area here, especially when we talk about these types of deployments. Configuration, we've been talking about a lot of to customers where they have to do a lot of devices they're having to support, a lot of network locations, a lot of configuration changes, a lot of compliance complexity. And so ensuring that we have not only just configuration compliance, but also monitoring our changes. If there's a change, who made the change when, color coding that configuration change, and then being able to have some sort of compliance policy rule sets, so that way, no matter where the device is, no matter what the role of that device is, I can set some sort of rules, so that way, if it's a router switch firewall, we also have a similar one for our servers, for server configuration monitor. So if we do need to, we can do, matching to see, is this not in the configuration, and then be able to report that back in the system. Like I mentioned, we are able to do this with network devices. We have similar reports for servers as it relates to server configurations. So especially if there are things like, server configuration here, there's a certain group policy rule that must be configured, and because it's not configured, it's outside of this policy rule sets, where we can actually set a severity, and then let us know in the system, hey, these are the remediation steps, so that we can go ahead and resolve this issue. So that way, on the next scan, next check, it'll go ahead and, yesterday or whenever last scan it failed, but then we can go ahead and on the next scan, I'll go ahead and pick it up, and it'll let us know if it was a success or not. Jumping over from our configuration real quick, I'm going to go over to our security event. When we talk about security events, we have a lot of customers that need to do log correlation, especially real-time log correlation. Now, especially when we talk about system endpoints or devices, I always say we need to look at sometimes the device can only stream logs or send syslog or send some logging to a collector. And so that's great for us because we are able to collect the log, correlate the log, and then you can actually set event rules. So in case there are maybe certain event sources, messages in the events, we could go ahead and do certain actions on the infrastructure. So going from I'll just go through our rule template real quick. So for more traditional devices like your workstations, there's for Windows workstations, they actually have one for USB devices. So if a user was to do something like plug in a USB device or move files around, we could do things like let you know about that file, and then maybe if they make too many file changes across that drive, reject that drive or disable that account. There are similar ones for virus. So if any virus updates failed, maybe update failed like 5 or so times, maybe we need to go ahead and remove that from the domain or remove that from segment it from the network infrastructure. So because it's obviously having a failure update, and there's a very high worm or some problem where that could be causing that block. Bad state's a known one, especially for Symantec and other brand vendors, where it's reporting that it is reporting some sort of virus or quarantine actionable event that has occurred. Especially when we look at files, there are not only just those USB files, but also file auditing. So taking file ownership, deleting sensitive files. I always say with users, especially when we look at users, we could say like user accounts created, modified, deleted, locked out, reassigned, added to certain groups. Maybe they're logged on after hours and we know that they shouldn't be on, especially between the hours of 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So I want to go ahead and get just a quick report or alert notification about that one in there. Also being removed or modified from these groups. So like I said, there's a lot of different rule templates that we do create out of the box, but we also do create a great system because the idea is when we see the logs, we see the different log sources, we can go ahead and set up different rule filters. So we can say that, hey, I want you to only look at just login failures. And if this is a great filter here, we can actually send this to then become that rule. So it's a great way of just creating a quick filter to see, is this something I want to see appropriately before we then can go ahead and flag it into some sort of actionable event of, sending a basic text, a basic email message notification, or if we need to go into something a little bit more advanced. Really, one of the last areas to make sure to go ahead and go in here is the dashboarding. Once you do have a lot of the alert sources coming in, one of the nice things about the system is being able to create and customize your own dashboards. So in case you do need to add different key performance indicator widgets, or based upon what's coming in the log sources, we can go ahead and report and reflect what's going on a little bit more as a whole, what's like login failures, or maybe it's something that a specific application is doing actionably, and we can go ahead and show that as really a little of an interactive report, because you'll notice that these show us like logon failures. If I click on this report, it'll actually start taking you over to that report view area in here for more detail. So that's a nice view in here, is being able to go and click and basically go straight to that report, and then have that as a report as a quick output. Now there are some other products that we also make sure to mention on here, so I want to make sure we had enough time to touch them all. One of the other ones I brought up here a little bit earlier was really two of our ticketing tools. We have our first one, which is our SolarWinds our SolarWinds Web Help Desk. Give me just a second here. I'm just relogging it in here. Our Web Help Desk is our ticketing. We have two ticketing tools. It's what we consider one of our ticketing tools, where it's an on-premise tool. You can load it locally with the system. What you have the ability to do is load it so that in case you need to create a lot of different request types. If you do need to do just real quick ticket processing, we do have the capability of being able to set up the different alerts or different ticket process rules. It's really simple to actually move and migrate your existing system, because there is a full import method in the Web Help Desk. So in case you do need to import previous tickets, really any information of the system, there is an importation method to bring and import that data into the system, so that you can really start working with our ticketing process in here. We've simplified this so that, I always say at the end of the day, the idea is, it's simplified for the technician as well as the user, because, based upon the user, maybe I want them to know about certain KD articles. So when they're maybe a new user and they're setting up wireless support, they should know, this is the wireless access. Here we can actually include a frequently asked questions. So, here we actually also include instructions. Hey, see that FAQ before submitting our help request, right? Little things that we can do to educate the user, inform the user, to get the basic tickets off our back, and then be able to actually work the real stuff, the real tickets. And one of the other big ones in here I always say is hiding ticket priority, because every ticket is a urgent ticket to everybody sometimes. So sometimes one of the things that you can actually do is change those or automatically hide the request types. Also, you can do like a procurement request. So let's say I need to purchase new systems, new hardware. There is an approval process, so that way if I do need to have someone vote yes or no for purchasing that hardware or those devices, we actually do have a full workflow process in here. There's also the ability for even the end user to do a little bit of ticket management on their side, because that's really where a little bit of your customer follow-up sometimes happens on their front end, is them calling in to say, hey, what's the current status of this ticket? So being able for them to look at the ticket, cancel the ticket, reopen the ticket if it's occurring again. So you can actually set up different rules, different different areas, so that those areas can be set up. So if the ticket is in a soft resolution after 48 hours, let's go ahead and resolve it completely, so that way it can't be reopened if needed. If it has been completed completely, maybe we want to go ahead and post a request survey. So you can go ahead and have that, and that's actually a reportable in our tool. So in case we do want to see, like, what our customers are saying about our ticketing process, is there anything that we can improve? There's actually a full report that you can actually run in the system to take a look at the different surveys. They actually do have those survey results as an output. And really, one of the last areas I'd like to touch on here is that this does have a quick soft integration with Dameware Mini Remote Control. So if you do have you can actually do a connector where it does go to bring up our Mini Remote Control tool. And what is great about this here is it allows us to really see what the user sees. Now, I'm actually using this to connect to my virtual machine, actually, but that's actually where I've been utilizing this tool for about 20 years. And so one of the things about the Dameware Mini Remote Control, which is nice about this, our remotable tool, is, like I mentioned, see what the user sees, being able to, we can visualize and see their system. I can also take over their system. So if I needed to, I could go ahead and connect to one or more other system endpoints, take a look at what their desktop is. Maybe I'm on the phone with them, so I could go ahead and work through some issue because they're remote, and then they can walk me through the process and be like, oh, well, the reason why this icon is here is because of you forgot to do this real quick. Go ahead and hit here, and it'd be fine. If there's any issues with connectivity, there's a chat Also, I always say if there's a latency issue, I could lock their keyboard and mouse. I've had several times where there's a latency problem, and suddenly I can't. They're moving the mouse, and there's just some sort of disconnect. So by being able to take over that action, and then also sending and receiving files. So if I needed to, I could actually send or receive a file from the system, and then being able to just right-click and then send it back to the host locally if we need to. So there is the ability for us to set up those accessible rules, and then in the same regard, we can actually set up security rules so that only certain users or certain AD users or certain AD groups can only access or only log in. If they're not a part of these, not a part of administrators or a part of these groups, they must get requests to get logged in. They can't log in unless they're at the login desktop. There's a lot of different rules for how connectivity can be set up, and this can actually be deployed through group policy through HKey local machine in your registry keys. So that's what I actually do here in my system. Is any system on my domain gets those keys, even if they don't have the agent installed. So if it potentially gets installed, it already has the security rule set applied to the system. Now, with the other Dameware tool, we also have the Dameware Remote Support. Remote Support is also our other tool that we use. I always say what's different with the Remote Support is that it includes the MiniRow Control, so that see what the user sees, in addition to being able to access the system without taking over the user system screen. So I need to see what's going on with their volume drive. I need to run the registry. I need to look at registry edits. I need to go modify those current keys or add a folder in there. Do a couple tasks, and then I'll send them a message. Hey, go reboot your machine in an hour, and that fix will be applied. So you can do a lot of those tasks in areas through through the Remote Support tool. So that way, like I said, you're not taking over that user screen. You can definitely take all those actions in here. Yeah, some of the other ones in here is things like viewing the Windows Event Log, showing all running processes, showing services, a little bit of command prompts, and then the remote control, which will open up that MiniRow Control application. So I just want to make sure I brought up a little bit of additional resource areas. We have quite a number of blogs, actually also a podcast too, but these are 4 specific that we do have, 4 blogs, and also a case study with the Texas Department of Transportation. Texas Department of Transportation has a very large deployment of systems, IoT, because they do support the state highway system for the state of Texas. So having to support state highway, interstates, interstate feeds, having to support line of sight, and very different networks. So we do have a lot of case study there for you for more information. So great. So now I want to make sure I had a little bit here time for a little bit of Q&A here. So it looks like I had a little bit of questions here real quick. So I had a question real quick that asked about a little bit about IoT. So the customer was asking about a little bit about what different ways or different methods that can we kind of monitor or look at different IoT systems. And I always say it really depends upon the API of the system, but really you have a lot of capabilities with our tools. So like with the server and application monitor, we have our API, so you can just do a basic API pull from the system. There's also under the application templates, a lot of customers use the HTTP GET or the HTTP POST commands to pull system data. There's also scripting, Python, Perl, PowerShell scripts to pull that data in case you do need to pull custom information. And then I actually went and spent some time doing some custom in SNMP, and you can also do that too, is customize your SNMP pullers on Linux, Unix-based systems and create additional OIDs, which then can be leveraged not only by the server and application monitor, but by like network performance monitor or any SNMP enabled protocol type tool. Okay, so I see there was a question here that I was asking about showing server or system or server interconnectivity. And looking here, it looks like between like a server or SQL client and a SQL database server. So we do have the ability of showing like server inter-server or inter-services connectivity. We do have what is called or actually that's where we leverage our SolarWinds Orion agents. The agents is leveraged in that regard because it will listen to the source and destination ports and protocols of the SQL clients. So let us know, is it using 1433, 1434, and then the source and destination when you have the agent installed on both systems. It will report that latency and endpoint system. Okay, so I want to make sure that when I touched on everything. So real quick, if y'all I had a couple questions left, but I just ran out of time here. But so if y'all do have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll try to get in touch with you as well. Our contact details are on the screen. Also have additional contact details in case you do have any questions about, you can call our phone number, our 100 number. There's also our email queue as well. We do also have a lot of documentation, a lot of information available to you. So if you do need to look about trainers about product-specific areas, product-specific tools, be aware you can go to our website. Also, if you do own a tool and have access to the SolarWinds customer portal, there are free 1 to 4 training classes. 1 to 4 training classes are available to you for products that I've shown you today. So you do have access to log in and sign up for those classes. That's a newer feature function that we've added into your customer portal recently for you. And with that, I just want to go ahead and say thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.